there are Buddhist Zionists. There are many different types of Zionists that are not just Christians, but there are Christian Zionists as well. And if you've been curious about Christian Zionism and about non-Jewish Zionism, so this will be a great lecture for you, which will hopefully help you understand the idea of where non-Jewish Zionism comes from. So let's get started here and see. So the first thing I want to bring up is this past summer, Israel enjoyed its 12th American presidential visit. American presidential visits are very interesting. It's a big honor, right? The American president does not travel to too many countries. And the fact that most American presidents come to Israel and visit Israel is a very important statement about the United States-Israel relationship and how valuable American presidents see the relationship with Israel and how valuable they see Israel in terms of America's national security and America's interest. Well, this year, President Biden in July visited Israel, one of the first countries that he visited as president, and it was a monumental visit. It was a 2-day visit, very long actually. It was a little over 2 days. It sounds 2 days doesn't sound that long for you and I to go visit somewhere for 2 days. Sounds like a very short visit for the president of the United States. Who usually goes on an international trip and goes to many different stops. It's actually a much bigger deal. And the president came. This was President Biden's 10th trip to Israel. President Biden was, before he was president, he was vice president and came to Israel a number of times. And before vice president, he was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And he was in the Senate for 40 years. So during his 50-year pre-presidential elected leadership roles and his positions in the Senate and as vice president, he made it clear how valuable Israel was. He always loves mentioning the fact that from Golda Meir until Bibi Netanyahu, including Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, he's met with every single Israeli prime minister, which is quite the accomplishment. Not many people have lived long enough to say such a thing. Him being 80 years old, he's able to say that not only has he been alive long enough, but he's met with them all, and they've appreciated that friendship. Well, in any case, he ended in the middle of his talks. He said something which was quite fascinating. For those that have watched President Biden through his career, it was no surprise that he said it. But as the president of the United States, this was the first time President of the United States had said it. What he said was, you do not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist. He said it on the tarmac at the welcoming ceremony at Ben Gurion Airport with Air Force One behind him. And it was a key moment. It took a lot of Israelis by surprise. A lot of Israelis know that there are Christians that are very supportive of Israel. They donate to Israel. They do various things to support Israel, come here and volunteer. And Israelis are familiar with that phenomena. But there's a difference between, to an Israeli, being somebody describing themselves as supportive of Israel and a Zionist. A Zionist is somebody who buys into the ideology, buys into the movement of Zionism. That's a very big thing. That's a very impressive statement to make. It's really like signing up more than you're a fan, but it's almost like signing up as you're a member of the team now. It's a much different level of commitment to say that you are a Zionist than to say that you support Israel. So that's a big deal. And the question is, what did President Biden mean when he said that he's a Zionist? How did that work when he talked about being a Zionist? And how can a non-Jew be a Zionist? The Zionist seems to be a Jewish movement. So that's what we're going to examine here. And the idea is that people generally look at Zionism as a Jewish movement. Zionism was an ideology that started with Avram Avinu 4,000 years ago. In these lectures, we're very clear on stating that Zionism did not start with Theodor Herzl. It wasn't a movement that started 150 years ago or 125 years ago. And had its first conference in Basel, Switzerland. Zionism goes back, the ideology of Zionism, the philosophy of Zionism, the idea that the Jewish people's homeland is the land of Israel, and that's where they belong, goes back to God telling Abraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land to the land of Israel. Now, God didn't say where to go. God said, just keep going, and I'll tell you where to stop. And when Avram got to Israel, God said, okay, this is it. This is your land. This is the land I'm going to give to your descendants. This is going to be your people's homeland. And Abraham created an entire people, an entire nation, and this became that nation's homeland. It became the homeland of the Jewish people. And this ideology, lasted through King David and the inauguration of the first temple by King Solomon, and went through the inauguration of Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, went through the destruction of the first temple, the return of the Jewish people to Israel after the destruction of the first temple and their exile to Babylonia and to Persia, and then it kept on going. This philosophy kept on going for thousands of years. When we were in exile, the ideology of the fact that the Jewish people's homeland and their right to be somewhere is in the land of Israel was an ideology and a philosophy that Jews believed in throughout the 2,000 years. And there was always even a small Jewish community inside the land of Israel. There was always a Jewish community here. So the ideology of Zionism is thousands of years old, but it's very Jew-centric. It's very centered around the idea that Jews should come back to Israel. So where do non-Jews walk into this tent of Zionism? It's almost as out of place as a non-Jew walking into the synagogue on Yom Kippur or on Rosh Hashanah and walking into the middle of the highest prayers of the year and saying, okay, where's my seat? So everybody would look around and be like, listen, this isn't your place, right? I'm glad that you're interested, but then maybe there's a kiddush afterwards, but what are you doing in this Jewish tent here? So where's the room for non-Jews in Zionism? How could that, first of all, how do they feel comfortable? Why do they feel comfortable? Why do they want a part of it? Right? It's not for them. It's not that we're gonna have a section inside of our land that's gonna be for non-Jews. Right, we're not going to have a part where the non-Jews and that's not their motivation. They're not trying to say, okay, the majority of the land of Israel should be for Jews, but we want a piece also. We want some of it as well. That's not what they're saying either. So, what is the idea of non-Jews inside the tent of Zionism? That's our essential question, and we should know that before we explain what they're doing there. There's a long history of non-Jewish Zionism, not just in the ideology, but actually in practical political Zionism. Jewish practical political Zionism doesn't get off the ground until Herzl, until the late 1800s. People were talking about it, people were making plans, some people moved in, but in terms of, okay, let's, brass tacks, let's see, can we get Jews back to the land of Israel? Can we do this? Well, who are the people that were into this, right? Who were those people? Who were the people that were thinking about this, of thinking of making this a practical way? And you see in the mid 1800s, early 1800s even, the non-Jews, especially Christians in the United States, start having an idea called restorationism, which is restoring the Jewish people back to their land. This is something that they start to think about. They start to say, okay, this is something that we should be doing. We should bring the non-Jews back to the land of Israel. Jews back to the land of Israel. That's their homeland. Let's see if we can get this done. And you have people as well known as Abraham Lincoln and Woodrow Wilson, American presidents, Churchill. All these people believed in this idea that the Jewish people really should not be wandering the world. We should bring them back to their land. Palestine was essentially an empty wasteland. It became very in for non-Jews to travel to Palestine in the 1800s. We know of Mark Twain's famous writings about being in Palestine and walking and seeing absolutely nothing there. Christians came, the American colony outside of the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Jerusalem, what we call the Shimon HaTzadik neighborhood in Jerusalem. The American Colony Hotel is called the American Colony Hotel because there were so many American Christians that were visiting the land of Israel or Palestine at the time, that the Americans built their own section in Jerusalem where they would stay. Today it's a hotel where unfortunately, a lot of international reporters come that don't have such a favorable view of the state of Israel, but that's the idea. Now, so you have this wellspring of support of bringing Jews back in a very practical way, which then turned into the Balfour Declaration. It turned into a United Nations partition plan. There was a lot of movement. It turned into the San Simon Conference, where the world began to realize the Jews should be back, and they should be in their land. So, but if we look at the total history of non-Jews, and we start looking at Gentile approach to Jews, it's not one that's favorable. So for Jews that were used to Christians persecuting them, whether it's through the Crusades or through pogroms or through Holocaust, so the idea of non-Jews saying, no, we're behind you on getting you back to your land, that seemed a little odd to people, and still does. Now, there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there about Christian evangelicals who want the Jews back to their land. What's their true motivation? Are they trying to convert us? Is this an aspect of missionizing? Hey, we'll give you, hundreds of millions of dollars in support, but on the back end, we want to make sure that you're with us in the church and you're with us in our beliefs. Is this an idea of they have some sort of belief of their Messiah? And therefore we want to get you to believe in we want you to come back to Israel, and our Messiah can only come when all the Jewish people are back in Israel. So now we're going to try to get you all back and make sure all the Jews are there and the Jews are in charge, so that our Messiah will come. There's a lot of cynical words out there, and cynical suspicions out there in the Zionist community as to what the true motivations and intentions of Christians are. Now, in Jewish tradition, we are taught that we should be suspicious of Gentiles. We're not supposed to just simply accept them at their word, that they're in our best interest. We're told to be very careful, because in the past, we have been burned time and time and time again by non-Jews who have told us that they have our best interests in mind. And then it turns out, either when we reject their philosophy, their religious beliefs, or just at some point when they change their minds, we become we get into a lot of trouble. We become targets of their persecution. So having what's the Christian motivation? Now, Zionism, the philosophy, is based on a very simple idea. It would seem to be a complicated idea because so many people have trouble wrapping their head around it, but it's a very simple idea. Jews are the indigenous people to the land of Israel. They have the longest claim of anybody on earth today to the land of Israel, and therefore they deserve to live in, settle, and govern that land. Simple idea, okay? And the world has denied the Jewish people the ability to live in their land for thousands of years. So therefore, justice, if you are a person who stands for justice, justice would demand that you correct a situation that's unjust and bring the Jewish people back to their land. It's a very logical idea, one that should be easy for the world to grasp, and the world did grasp it. In 1947, the world's international body takes a vote, the United Nations, and they seem to, for some reason, have the authority to decide what's going to happen with the land of Palestine, and they decide to give it back to the Jewish people. Now, the Jewish people have a tradition that when we see wisdom among non-Jews, we believe it. We believe that wisdom. If a non-Jew has a scientific experiment and it works, we believe it. If they have an economic theory and it seems logical, we don't say reject the theory just because they're not Jewish. We believe it. So too here, when it comes to non-Jews getting on board with a movement of justice, which is logical and wise, it shouldn't matter to us what's motivating them. Okay, so let's imagine a Christian is motivated to support the state of Israel because they want us to convert to Christianity. Okay, so we can set up their support in a way which doesn't allow us to be exposed to their missionizing. If they believe that their Messiah is going to come when we get to Israel, so we also want to get to Israel. So what's the difference if they're doing it for a different motivation? We're we're not ascribing to that motivation. We're not validating that motivation. We're not saying that what they're saying is true. That's not what's happening. What we're doing is we're simply saying, okay, we're grateful for the support. And it doesn't, to me, and this is my opinion now, this is where fact stops and I start, I don't see the logic in rejecting help and support simply because you do not understand the motivations of the person that's offering you support. If there's risk to you, then I understand completely. But if there's no risk to you, so then what do you care? What's the difference? Why would anybody be suspicious? Now, this isn't the place, but there are religious beliefs for religious non-Jewish Christians. And if you're interested in studying it, so there are a number of books. One of my favorite is the author of Pastor Victor Stursky's books, and David Bragg has a great book on Christian evangelism, and that's a place where you could study what their theories are if it interests you. But the idea that we should just reject Christian Zionism or non-Jewish Zionism because it stems from Christianity and we don't know what's motivating them, or they have motivations which we don't ascribe to, it does not seem logical to me. So when you ask, we started this off by asking, what is the benefit of what is non-Jewish Zionism? Non-Jewish Zionism is the same as Jewish Zionism. It's an idea of allowing for justice to take hold, which is that the Jewish people belong in their homeland. Today, the Jewish people are already in their homeland, and we don't need people pushing to get us into their homeland. It becomes ensuring that the Jewish people are safe and secure from enemies like Iran, which want to get us off our homeland and away from our homeland. So that is the idea. We're grateful for Jewish and for non-Jewish Zionist support of Zionism and the land of Israel. And that's the reason why we should be, that's what non-Jewish Zionism is, what a Christian, Muslim, and Buddhist Zionist is. They are simply people who support the idea of the Jewish people having a right to determine their own future in their historic homeland in the land of Israel. And we are absolutely grateful for them, for their support, and we hope that more of it comes along. Okay, that's this week's Zionist lecture. Shalom.